Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Keith Giffen Day, so we're looking at the next issue of The Defenders that he worked on. This is issue number 51, cover dated September 1977. Talking about the cover, not Keith Giffen, still not a household name or a hot artist, so still getting other artists to do the covers for this title. This one is actually by George Perez, and George Perez who still is working in a lot of the Kirby tropes, I think. When you look at this one, the pose, the type of cover that he's doing, those, headshots in the sky. This character definitely has a very Kirby feel in his movement and his costume design. Not sure who designed him. His name's The Ringer, not the most classic of characters, but, definitely has a pretty cool look, I think. And even the buildings back here definitely have a lot of Kirby tropes within their design here. So definitely George Perez, whose style will obviously move away from the Kirby stuff, but he's still kind of still very much in that Kirby mold here in 1977. Ring after deadly ring settles over Nighthawk, and the only escape from their crushing embrace is death. There's a preview of what we're going to be seeing on the inside, so let's have a look. So what's fun about this issue as opposed to the last few is in comparing this issue to the last few. So up until this point, we've had different inkers. We had 2 issues with Mike Royer doing some of the inking where the very Kirby-inspired Keith Giffen artwork looked pretty much close to a Dead Ringer to Kirby, even though there were some other flourishes that were maybe more like Steranko, but definitely had a strong Kirby vibe. This issue shows you how much an inker can change the look of a book, right? The aesthetic of it. So now we've got David Kraft writer, Keith Giffen, spelt wrong, penciler. KLAUS JANSON is the inker. So B. Patterson letterer and Phil Rash is the colorist. So KLAUS JANSON, a very kind of respected inker who's been around since the 70s, right? So probably it's still fairly early on in his career here before he was inking Frank Miller on Daredevil. But a very heavy-handed inker who definitely kind of imposes his own aesthetic on top of other people's pencils. So anytime he inks someone else, you can tell it's KLAUS JANSON, and right away you can see here that we're losing a lot of that kind of Kirby effect because the inking is much more of a lush Neil Adams kind of 70s rough inking style. Not that one is good or bad. It's just there are some inkers who are a lot more in tune and respectful of what the penciler is laying down, and there are other inkers who will make decisions and change things a little bit. And I always felt like KLAUS JANSON was someone who probably worked really quickly, so that's why we get kind of a rougher hewn, kind of sketchier line when it comes to the inking, but very effective nonetheless. But again, the fun in comparing the two, obviously I prefer the more Kirby-inspired stuff, but that's just a personal choice. So starting off, like I said, with a splash page, we can totally see right away the aesthetic is quite different from what we had with Mike Royer. The layouts and stuff are very similar. Still lots and lots of debris. It's just kind of a thing in the last few issues. Keith Giffen really going nuts when he draws the debris. And I mean, the poses of the characters and the positioning and the anatomy is all very Kirby. And I mean, Janson's still coming in doing those bold kind of thick Kirby lines here and there. But I definitely feel like that Kirby aesthetic is lost a little bit with Janson inking here. And again, in some of these shots, I could almost imagine this is like a Matt Murdock in Daredevil or something. Always loved double page splashes. This is not quite one. They've thrown in a few panels on the side there to break it, not quite make it a double page splash, but I mean, almost. And we're getting that weird effect again that we got last issue where there's kind of a border left between these 2 pages. I don't know production wise why that was being done. Seeing it now, I saw it last issue and I wasn't sure if it was a production issue or a conscious choice. I feel like now this is not a conscious choice, but some sort of production thing. Maybe they still hadn't figured out how to exactly print up double page splashes back then. I don't know. Maybe the printers was the problem. If anyone has an answer to that, let me know. Love this kind of look to the art here that gives it kind of a more psychedelic feel, more of a blacklight poster kind of feel. And again, this face here, this is very similar to the kind of faces I would see in Daredevil by Frank Miller, and now realizing that the look of those faces probably had a lot more to do with KLAUS JANSON than with Frank Miller himself. Keith Giffen, no slouch when it comes to layout and storytelling. I mean, the storytelling is very clear, easily understandable. Here, just something you don't see much of anymore is a 12 panel page here with all these small panels, but I think it looks great. Just this close-up shot of Moon Knight with the Schlitz in his hand. He's got a beard, just kind of odd bit of story there. This profile here, definitely very Kirby-esque, even though Janson is inking it, but I feel like Janson's the one adding more of the shadows here to maybe make it a little less Kirby. And, you know, Giffen still excelling very much at the Kirby tech in these two panels. Man, these 70s comics and their ads, eh? It's Franco Columbo, if I'm not mistaken. Arnold Schwarzenegger's buddy. You know, overly muscled character that if you ever listen to some Arnold Schwarzenegger interviews, apparently was, you know, pound for pound the strongest man, and can do stuff that no other man could do, even if they were bigger and in size. Again, Franco Columbo, I think he was like 5'4" or something. He's pretty short for a bodybuilder. And again, I mean, there's a lot going on in this issue. Moon Knight has been is you know, kind of out of the storyline, and each character here is kind of starting up a new storyline. Not really interested in who these characters are, to be honest. I've said it before, these reviews mostly focus on the art. This face here, I think, is definitely very Kirby inspired as well. I feel like, you know, here and there, some of that Kirby vibe is shining through a bit more. Even though we got the KLAUS JANSON inking. And we get our first final look here at the Ringer. And again, I mean, I don't think this is a Jack Kirby design, but it's definitely, you know, definitely very much inspired by his type of design and the costume elements and stuff. The tubing, even the slight squiggly lines here and there, which, as I said, I don't feel like Janson is really highlighting, but every once in a while they kind of make their way through the art. Kind of an odd design that he would just have this, you know, I feel like that would obscure your vision somehow. So it's kind of an odd choice there. And again, not a character that I think is going to be winning any popularity contests or coming back very often. Kind of a, you know, villain of the issue type character. No slouch when it comes to the establishing shots either. So, you know, I would never in any way accuse Giffen of being lazy, you know, as opposed to like yesterday's review with the Jay Lee stuff. Every panel has some sort of background element, whether, you know, minimalist like here or a little more evocative with the elements here. And again, look at that. Like this shot here, you know, this could be KLAUS JANSON inking anyone, because this 100% looks like KLAUS JANSON. Anyone could have drawn the underneath pencils there. And I would not be able to recognize it as anything else but KLAUS JANSON. Some more ads. Man, this is... Oh, jeez. So a few Kirby-style flourishes on this page. The big fist, the extreme force shortening, you know, of the Ringer here, I think is definitely a Jack Kirby thing. Even here, the power emanation, right, from the rings attaching around Nighthawk here. All of this just, to me, screams Kirby. At least in the layout. Yeah, really, I don't know if I mentioned this last review. I'll say it again. Sometimes you're going to repeat yourself, right? And I apologize for that. I feel like, you know, maybe reading comics back then, no one was really annoyed by these ads just because, you know, every media that you would consume, newspapers would have ads, magazines would have ads, TV would have ads, right? So it's almost like it's a normal kind of structured thing back then. You just probably expected them. Maybe we were spoiled. You know, my first kind of contact with comics with no ads throughout at least the story part of it was with Image Comics, right? And then, of course, going back and collecting, you know, prestige stuff like Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, there were no ads in that either. But I feel like people from the 70s, they just probably took it all in stride. And because I've been spoiled by those books with no ads, it just annoys me every time I see them. But again, I feel like people back then just probably, you know, didn't bat an eye and just kind of moved on through. So the story kind of slows down here, and that's why we get the typical Kirby 6-panel grid. You know, nothing too exciting is happening. And then we get this character here, and I'm just going to point him out because, like, you know, I'm not saying Keith Giffen draws super realistic faces, but, I mean, the proportion stuff feel fairly realistic. And then all of a sudden you got this guy with a really long face, and it just kind of jumped out at me, and I thought it was odd. So I'm wondering if this is, you know, based on someone they know or a famous person or something. I'm not quite sure, but if anyone knows what exactly this is, like, I know Jim Shooter wasn't around back then in 1977. I could be wrong. He would show up at Marvel soon, right? Late 70s, early 80s. But I almost feel like maybe this is like a Jim Shooter kind of thing. I don't know for sure. And rest in peace, Jim Shooter. He just passed away a few days ago as I do this review. So kind of a controversial figure in the comics world. But, you know, some people will say he did a lot of bad for comics. Some people say he did a lot of good. You know, he did help make Marvel pretty successful there in the 80s, I think. So I'll at least give him that. And that's basically where this issue leaves us off. Coming next issue, The Mystery of Lunatic. You know, anytime you want to make a name cool, you change one letter, right? This will become a trope later on. And The Return of Prince Namor the Submariner. So I'll be interested in seeing Keith Giffen's version of Namor when we do the review of that issue next week. And I just thought this ad was pretty funny. Dino De Laurentiis, famed kind of not quite B movie, but kind of a B movie producer. And this is kind of proof of that, because I feel like this is probably post Jaws, more than likely, right? And, you know, he's the kind of guy who's like, well, Jaws worked, so we need some other kind of, you know, he probably thought an orca was a fish, and we need some kind of dangerous fish movie and to ride the wave of that Jaws popularity. So again, I don't know for sure, but he seems like the type who wouldn't even know that a killer whale is a mammal and not a fish. But to go after a shark, where do you go? Killer whale, that kind of makes sense. I need to look this up on YouTube real quick just to see what this is all about, the Orca movie. Don't think it's a classic, never heard much about it. Great painting, though, I got to say here. Back when movie posters, used to have a lot of movie posters that were done by artists and painted. Obviously, today it's pretty much all digital, so I appreciate the kind of vintage, cool look at this. All right, there you go, guys. That is my review of The Defenders, issue number 51. If you have any comments, concerns, let me know in the comments below. If you're still watching and you are subscribed, thank you so much. I appreciate the loyalty. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second. Helps the channel out, helps us grow, helps get us up to our first goal of 500 subscribers, where YouTube starts helping us out a little bit and getting the big baby word out there to other people online. So thank you once again for watching, guys, and have yourselves an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.
Subscribe! Like!